Welcome to SQL Handbook. My name is Shashain, and in this video, we're going to go through what are foreign keys in a database. Okay, so in my previous video, I talked about primary keys, and just again, a primary key is just a constraint that we can use on a column or a set of columns to say, right, this column or this set of columns is what we use to uniquely identify every single row in a given table. Okay, now that just means that every value in that column or set of columns is very unique. It is not very unique, it's just unique, right? So now, what is a foreign key? So a foreign key is also a type of constraint, and we use foreign keys to establish these rules or these relationships between tables, okay? We can think of a foreign key as this. Let's say we have a table A and table B, a parent table and a child table, okay? We put a foreign key on the child table, and that foreign key, so it'll be let's say it's one column for now. That one column that has a foreign key on it is referencing a column in the parent table, right? And only values that already exist in that column in the parent table can go into the child table, right? Into that column. If it doesn't exist, if that value doesn't exist in the parent table column, it will not be able to be entered into the child table column, right? That's what we call a foreign key relationship, right? And that's why we say foreign keys are used to uphold a referential integrity between tables, okay? And that's how we know that a relationship is now established between those tables, okay? So over here, I've written a few notes on what foreign keys are. So as I've said, a foreign key is a column or a group of columns in one table that points to a candidate key in another table. Okay, something important here is that a foreign key cannot be mapped to just any other column, okay? Like in the parent and child example I gave earlier, the child cannot reference just any random column in the parent table. The column in the parent table needs to be a candidate key, and you might not be aware of what a candidate key is, but a candidate key is just a column that is unique in its values, right? And there are two types of candidate keys. That is primary keys or unique keys, okay? I know most of the time people say like a foreign key is just a column or a set of columns that references a primary key in another table. That is correct, but it's not the full explanation, because a foreign key can also reference columns that are not primary keys. As long as they have a unique constraint on it, then a foreign key can also reference that column. Now you might be thinking, what is the difference between a primary key and and a unique key? Well, because you might be thinking like a primary key is already unique, isn't it? So aren't they the same thing? Not quite. So a primary key, as I said, is either a column or a set of columns that is unique for every row in those columns, but they can't have any null values, right? And you only can have one primary key per table. But sometimes you want to enforce uniqueness in another column in that same table, right? In which case you can't do a primary key for another column because there's only one primary key allowed per table. That's why we have this idea of unique key. Okay, so unique is also another constraint you can use on a table. And I'll cover unique in a unique constraint in another video. But just for this quickly, a unique constraint is also a constraint that tells every single value in a column or a set of columns needs to have unique values. And it also can have null values. It can have one null value. Well, it depends on database, but in SQL Server, it only allows one null value, whereas a primary key allows no null values, right? So that's a bit of a difference with primary keys and unique keys. They are different things, but for this topic, for foreign keys, just understand that a foreign key needs to point to a candidate key, and a candidate key is either a primary key or a unique key in another table. Okay, cool. So that's what a foreign key, that's one of the rules for a foreign key needs to be established. And then it is used to create and enforce a link between the data in two tables. So like I said, we use foreign keys to establish relationships between tables, right? Now, doing this ensures referential integrity. You cannot insert a value into a foreign key column unless it already exists in the reference table. So again, as I said, that whole parent-child relationship, if you want to insert a value into a foreign key column that's in a table, that foreign key will reference another table. We'll call that the parent table. And that parent table, if it doesn't have a value already existing that you're inserting into the child table, you cannot insert that row into the child table, right? If you want that value to go into the child table, it'll first have to go into the parent table, and then you can insert it into the child table. Okay, let's go through a small example here just to help you guys visualize what I'm saying better. So, and also it prevents orphan records as well. And what does that mean? What does orphan records mean? Let's say again that parent and child relationship. Let's say the child table, you want to, let's say the parent table, sorry, that we get rid of a certain value that has that is referenced by another column in the child table, and we get rid of that value. Now, what happens is the child, if there's no foreign key, that child table in that column now has a value that is not referenced anywhere in the other table, and it doesn't really make sense because let's say it's a customer ID or something. We want, if there's no customer ID in the customers table, how can that value exist in other tables? It doesn't really make sense, right? Because the customer doesn't really exist. I'll go through that example here as well, just again give you a visual understanding of this. So here we have two tables. I have the create statements already written up. One is parent, one is child. These tables are already made. I've just given the create statements just so you understand how the tables are structured, right? So the customers table has customer ID and name, okay? So two columns. The customer ID is a primary key, okay? And then we have name, which is just a regular column, okay? Then we have another table called orders. Order ID in the orders table is a primary key, okay? Then we have customer ID, and then we have item column, okay? And then we have what we say a foreign key. So we have included a foreign key constraint on the customer ID column. So the column over here, we have said we're going to put a foreign key constraint on that column, and it references the customers table. So this table over here, that's the table name for what you're referencing. That's the customers table over here. And then that's the column in the table that we reference, which is customers. So we're referencing the customer ID in customers table for the customer ID in the orders table. Okay? And so whatever values go into the customer ID here in the orders table is now referenced to what's in the customer ID column in the customers table. Okay, and we can do that because the customer ID over here is also a primary key, right? And that's one of the rules. Remember, if we're going to create a foreign key and reference another column, the other column has to be a candidate key, which is either a primary key or a unique key. Okay, it's one of the rules for foreign keys. Right, so we can do that. We can do this, and I've made these two tables, and I've populated two tables, and over here we can see what's inside those two tables. So the first one is customers, and then the second one is orders. Okay, and we just have 3 rows in each table. And what you'll see is in the first table, customers, we have customer ID 1, customer ID 2, and 3, and some names. Okay, and then in the orders table, we also have customer ID, we also have order ID and item, but we're only focused on customer ID right now. And again, 1, 2, and 3. And we can have 1, 2, and 3 here because 1, 2, and 3 exist already in the customers table, 1, 2, and 3. Right? That's why we can have these values in the orders table. Okay? Now you can see over here I have a insert statement that says insert into orders table. Okay? And also something else to note here, I've given these comments parent table and child table. Child table is the one that has the foreign key that's referencing the parent table. Okay? Just to give a heads up on that. Now, sorry, back to this. So insert into orders table. Okay, so insert into this table over here, the child table, for these columns, order ID, customer ID, item. So order ID, customer ID, and item. These values. So for order ID, we want the value 104 to go in here. We want the value 5 to go for customer ID. And we want the value of headphones to go into the item column in the orders table. Okay, so we want this row to be inserted. Now, would this fail? Now, if I try to insert this row, this is a customer ID of 5. If I try to insert it, I get an error message. The error message says the insert statement conflicted with the foreign key constraint. And this foreign key constraint over here, this crazy name is if we go to that table, so open up the test database, I've done everything in test. And if I open up tables and I go to the orders table and I open up keys over here, you'll see that we have the primary key, which is the one on the order ID column, right? And then we have a foreign key constraint as well. which is what we put on the customer ID column, okay, in the orders table. So it says the insert statement conflicted with that foreign key. That's the same foreign key name over here. You can see right over there. The conflict occurred in database test, which is where I'm working, table customers, and what was the last bit? Column customer ID. Okay, so what it's saying here is that we can't insert this value set, which is 104, 5, and headphones, because it conflicts with the foreign key constraint. This is what I mean by we're able to uphold data integrity, right? We don't want this value to be inserted into the orders table. Why would we? Because this custom ID of 5 doesn't exist in the customers table, right? So if we insert this into the orders table, that would be an orphan record, right? Like I said earlier, foreign keys prevents orphan records. And now if this were to go into this table orders and we have this fourth row that says custom ID is 5, it won't make any sense to us because we don't know what custom ID 5, who it is, right? If we go to customs table and check who our customers are, we got custom ID 1, who is Alice, custom ID 2 is Bob, 3 is Charlie, but who's 5, right? We have no idea. We don't have that data. So why would we have an order for that customer if it doesn't exist in the customer table, right? This is what we mean by enforcing referential integrity between tables, okay? We don't want extra data going in here that's not already in the customer's table. We need, before we insert that data to this table, in the orders table, we'll need it in the customer's table. It only makes logical sense if it's in the customer's table, right? Otherwise, we don't know who the customer is. So this is how you enforce data integrity. One of the ways to enforce data integrity in SQL tables, right? Referential integrity, to be specific. Otherwise, we can get tables without these constraints. We could get tables where we get all these custom IDs and orders in our orders table, and they were not inserted correctly into the customers table for whatever reason. They were forgot about, or our code forgot to take that into consideration. And then we just have we have these orders for customers who we don't know who they are. And that becomes a problem for a business, right? So that's why foreign keys are important. That's why it's important for us to understand these concepts, okay? So I hope this helps you guys. Again, here are the notes for what a foreign key is. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. I hope this helped. I hope it wasn't too confusing. And please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.